Hare Krishna, everyone. This is Achyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today is Bhakti Wednesday. So I'm going to take a question that I got from the audience after some of the videos that I did last week, some of which touched on the theme of pacifism. And I'm not even sure if that's the right word. Maybe the right word is peacefulness. But the question went like this. You were talking about pacifism last week, so someone wrote in and said, and I was wondering what yogis have to say about pacifism, or Bhakti yoga has to say about pacifism, given that the Bhagavad Gita is all about a battlefield upon which Arjuna is told by Krishna to fight. How does that make any sense? Great question. I'm glad you asked. And so we're going to talk about, I think, 3 principles of yogic pacifism, which is maybe a little different from other versions of pacifism, or maybe should not even be called pacifism, but something else. Anyway, so first of all, people we have a lot of dichotomies in our head. If you're peaceful, it means that you can't take action. You can't do anything, or that you couldn't. For example, you may not ever get angry if you're a pacifist, or you may not find some usefulness for mobilizing the will, or to fight or struggle for something that you care about if you're a pacifist, none of which are actually true. So let's talk about what pacifism actually is from a yogic standpoint, as far as I've understood thus far from my teachers and from the Shastras, especially the Bhagavad Gita, which it's true. Arjuna finds himself on a battlefield at the outset of the Bhagavad Gita, and Krishna says, hey, look, you got to fight. But so he starts off by saying, look, yoga is not about retreating to a cave and ignoring the conflicts or events of life. It's not about bowing out because you think meditating is better. At the same time, it's also about how you engage with the kshetra, the field of activity, of karma, of dharma, and karma meaning sacred duty, which may include battles at times, or also the nature of everyday life. What to speak of battles, but just everyday life, which is a kind of battlefield, you could say. So the 3 principles, if I had to break them down, of yogic pacifism, at least in the Bhakti tradition, as I understand them, work like this. Peacefulness and compassion are practices that you embody every day, that you're trying to embody every day as a practitioner of Bhakti yoga, which means not that there is no such thing as violence, there is no such thing as conflict, there is no such thing as situations may arise in which you may actually have to fight someone or something, verbally, mentally, sometimes even physically. But still, the way in which we do things are deeply important, and we practice coming from a place of compassion, coming from a place of peacefulness, so that if and when conflicts arise, we handle them from that consciousness. So it's not a philosophy that says there is no such thing as conflict, or avoid conflict, or bow out of the struggles of the world, or ignore them, or bury your head in the sand. It's a philosophy that says the way you approach conflict and the way you move through life should be informed by the practice of peacefulness and compassion, which will always be tested when you feel like you have all the reason or righteousness in the world to justify being violent or acting in a way that does not show or demonstrate compassion. That's when you're tested. That's when it's always tested. And it doesn't matter where you come from, or what background of life you have, or what experiences, or what prior traumas. The work for everyone is the same, in the sense that the trauma is not the same, right? But the work for everyone is the same in the sense that we're choosing peacefulness and compassion as a response to the world, to our own hurt and pain, to the pain of others, which will sometimes come at us as an affront. Especially when we feel really justified in having a response that is not peaceful. That's why we have this practice. It's not that you'll get it perfect. It's that learning to respond with a kind of peaceful intelligence and tact that's the yogic form of pacifism, you could say. Number 2 is tolerance and humility. There's a lot in life that we have to learn how to tolerate. Now, that does not mean tolerate is also a word that people are like, I'm not going to tolerate that, right? In the religion of the ego, that is, modern self-help culture, the religion of the ego. And everything is about personal empowerment, about sovereignty, and about, it's my rights and my dignity and my identity and my will, and I'm not going to tolerate BS from anybody. So yogic peacefulness as a way of life, yogic pacifism as a way of life, is talking about how to respond to suffering within ourselves, within the world around us. And it's not saying, take it, act like a doormat. Okay, that's just an extreme polar opposite of a mentality that thinks I have to be king all the time. The opposite is that otherwise I'm a doormat. So if you get rid of the extremes of black and white thinking, then what we mean by tolerance is you have to learn how to tolerate both good and bad things. When really extremely good things come up, you have to tolerate them without your ego getting big or getting attached to them, or getting lost in the energy of something great or wonderful happening to the point that you forget yourself, or you forget your care or concern for other people or whatever. So like really good things can come along and really sweep us up in patterns that aren't necessarily helpful. So it's about, how do I enjoy life, for example, while tolerating the good things that can possibly carry me off. And that's tricky. That's a practice. It's sort of like saying, how do you enjoy a piece of cake without eating the whole thing? Or, how do I enjoy something that's really wonderful without it kind of becoming a compulsion of some kind that then I can never let go of. So tolerance is a multifaceted jewel. It has to do with tolerating the shortcomings of others, because we recognize we as a practice, we look inward at our own faults before judging other people's. So tolerance and humility go hand in hand. And again, in our modern egocentric, like the cult of the heroic Western ego, humility to us sounds like a dirty word. It sounds like a lack of self-worth, or a lack of self-preservation, or a lack of boundaries, or something like that. And if people think that when hearing the word humility, I fear that we have gone too far with the sense of how important each one of us are compared to someone else. The point of humility is not to, it would not be humble to make yourself a doormat, right? That would not be humble. That would be, self-harmful. What we mean by humble is that we don't think that we are above anybody else, right? As a practice, when someone makes a mistake, the first thing that you think is compassion, because, oh, voila, I could easily have done something. I could have messed. I could see myself having made a mistake, because I reflect constantly on the nature of my own shortcomings, not in a I'm bad kind of way, but in a way that keeps me. It's like that phrase you guys hear me say sometimes: stay close to your own hypocrisy, because it's your honesty, and your honesty is close to your simplicity, and simplicity to humility, which means I don't aggrandize myself in any situation. I really am careful of that. And it's that pairing of being tolerant of yourself, of others, of your own shortcoming, of others' shortcomings, of difficult situations, and of really good situations. You become tolerant of them. You learn how to enjoy them, but not get attached. You learn how to cry, but not get lost. Right. So tolerance is another way of saying temperance. Right. You could also, they're kind of synonyms in the yogic vocab, in my opinion. So it's like it's a temperate quality that you're developing, and along with that comes a kind of humble quality. I'm comfortable in my own shoes, that kind of quality, and I'm not greater than anyone else. And I'm not going to like falsely put myself below people to feign some kind of humble state either. So this is yogic pacifism at work. Peacefulness and compassion as practices, especially tested when we feel like we have a chip on our shoulder, when we feel like we have something that, I really have something to be mad or upset by or hurt by, and I'm going to stay identified with that, right? That we learn to let go of that as a way of life. We have compassion for ourselves, not righteousness. We have compassion for others and the things we care about. We are concerned with compassion and peacefulness for those things, not vindictiveness, self-righteousness, self-justification, all of that kind of stuff. Tolerance and humility. Again, we learn to tolerate, and you could say develop temperance. And we also are humble. We walk humbly in the world. And then number 3 is forgiveness and non-judgment. So forgiveness means that we are quick to forgive if people seek forgiveness, or even if they don't seek forgiveness, that we know it feels better in our heart. Now, you may forgive, but set a boundary, or you may forgive, but realize I can't be with someone or around someone or something. But forgiveness means that we reach into our hearts and we say, they're a hurting human being. People act the way that they do out of hurt and out of the twisting of desires that are healthy in nature. For example, everyone wants to be at peace or be happy. And then it's about the mangled, ways in which we go about that sometimes. So if we understand that, we can forgive people, even if we don't understand why they did something, or we can't fathom doing it ourselves, or we're hurt, or we don't want that person in our lives. Forgiveness is a practice. You can sit down once a day and write down a list of people and situations and things in yourself and around you that it's just time to say, I forgive you. It's okay. We all fall short. Everything falls short. There's that tolerance and humility again. Non-judgment means that you don't act like you know everything all the time about other people, about yourself, about situations. That as a practice, we stay curious and open-minded. We listen more than we come to judgments about things, which does not mean that you lack discernment or don't have any discernment at your disposal. It just means that you're careful to be, you don't want to, as a practice, as a rule, you don't act judgmentally. So the idea of yoga philosophy is that you cultivate these practices through sadhana, through daily spiritual practice. That if you sit, for example, and work your mantra meditation every day, which is a cornerstone of Bhakti yoga, what starts happening is you notice all of the voices and energies of your own mind and of your own spirit that are not peaceful, that are not compassionate, that tend to be judgmental, that tend to lack forgiveness, that are not very tolerant, that are very impatient, that are self-aggrandizing. You just get in touch with them. And there's nothing wrong with them. It's the simple acknowledgement that they're there, and the familiarity with those voices, and the slow, almost like learning to let the central governing self in you be the one that is peaceful, compassionate, tolerant, humble, forgiving, non-judgmental, etc. There's lots of other virtues we could name. That becomes the one that everything comes back to. That you start developing that as the higher self within you, because you spend time with all of those voices and qualities in the mind every day. And then that extends out into the world and how you deal with other people. And this happens very gradually over a long period of time. And that informs how you act when conflict arises. It doesn't say that there's no such thing as conflict, or that you ignore it or act like it's not there. It informs how you interact with it, or how long you'll entertain certain kinds of media or news or conversations about things that you notice, oh, hey, this is just triggering my self-righteous voice, because those voices because you're spending time with them, and you can see when they're starting to dominate or take over, and you know what path that leads down. You know what kind of karmic reactions come up when those voices tend to speak. People always ask, is it possible with this yogic paradigm to be an activist in the world? Of course. In my humble opinion, some of the most effective agents of change in the world, though not the only ones, have been those that are peaceful in nature. Peaceful demonstrations. I think activism in general, for whatever the case, whatever the cause may be, is always most effective when its leaders are bold and vision-based, meaning they have a vision, but the way in which they accomplish that is through peace, through compassion, through tolerance and humility, through forgiveness, through non-judgment, and through persistence of a peaceful and good cause. So, of course, now people may say, there's certainly times of war, and that's true. There are times of war. What's interesting about the Bhagavad Gita is that Krishna says that yoga is not inherently about running off to the cave and meditating and avoiding war. But also there's a way of fighting a battle that is not attached to results. And that when you're not attached to the results of a battle, even though it's worth fighting, that's when you're in the practice of yoga, even on the battlefield. That may sound counterintuitive or sort of paradoxical, like, well, that means you don't care. Well, no, of course you care, or you wouldn't be fighting. It's just that you're leaving the results up to divinity. And you're saying, look, my dharma might be to fight in a certain situation. But beyond doing the best I can, I'm not going to fight in a way that is not peaceful. The way of the peaceful warrior. The Tao Te Ching talks about this too. It talks all over about how there is a way of being even in battle that is inherently aligned and peaceful, which sounds, it's hard for us to even fathom what that means. But in my experience, the conflicts I have had in my life since practicing yoga have been inherently more enlightening and constructive. And so it's not about the denial or avoidance or negation of conflict. It's about how you do it. We don't need self-righteous, vindictive, chip on the shoulder, ego energy to guide us through conflict. In my humble opinion, we need the energies of yoga. There's so many different paths by different names, so I just call it yoga. But to me, these paths have also deeply informed the history of martial arts on this planet. It's amazing how closely the study and need for peace accompanies the study of warfare. So many martial arts skills and practices are inherently about a way of peace. It's like, if you're afraid of strength, if you're afraid of conflict, if you deny or negate it, what you resist persists. So in a lot of martial arts, it's about learning to cultivate a way of peace because you've explored and even faced some demons when it comes to fear, conflict, anger, aggression. So yoga is not at all saying that those energies don't have a place in creation or that we shouldn't integrate and understand them. But it's also not the same thing as glorifying them. It's about, everything in its right place at the right time in the right season. And the wise sage is one who knows which season it is and how to respond from that space of eternal dharma. I'm a spirit soul. I'm a part of God. How do I carry that divine wisdom in and through conflict? So that's my understanding of yogic pacifism, if we want to call it that, which maybe it's not good. Maybe it should just be called yogic peacefulness or something like that. Anyway, so that's what I've got for this Bhakti Wednesday. Thanks for the question. It's a really good one and dovetails nicely with some of the talks we had last week. There's a lot of heavy Mars energies in the air this summer, debilitated Mars and Taurus, Mars, Uranus, Mars, Saturn, a bunch of stuff like that. So I think this was a good talk to have and great question that was asked. So thanks for asking it. We'll see you again next Bhakti Wednesday. Hare Krishna.